Okay, let's dive right in. Have you ever stopped to think that the cyber threats we hear about, for banks or power grids,
Yeah.
well, what if they could target something like our DNA
Yeah.
or, say, the vaccines we rely on?
It sounds like something straight out of a movie, doesn't it?
It really does. But this whole area where, you know, digital stuff meets biology, it's opening up some serious new risks.
It's a really fascinating and maybe, yeah, a bit unsettling area. We call it cyber-biosecurity.
Cyber-biosecurity.
Yeah, basically the threats that pop up right where cybersecurity weaknesses meet biotech's power and its potential dangers.
Mm.
And, the briefer we looked at makes it really clear that it isn't just theoretical stuff anymore. Countries like Russia, North Korea, they've already shown they can pull off malicious cyber ops.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So this isn't some, far-off future problem.
Not at all.
We're digging into this briefer today, and it really lays out the key trends, the dangers, and what you really need to get your head around. So our mission, if you will, is to give you a clear picture of why this matters, what the big vulnerabilities are. Basically, why securing this whole bioeconomy thing is just so critical now.
Consider it a shortcut. Yeah. Get up to speed on something important that maybe doesn't get enough attention.
Exactly. So what's driving all this? The briefer points to a few key things, right? First up is automation.
Yes, the rapid pace of automation in biology is definitely a major driver.
So we're talking robotics, machine learning, the cloud,
Mm-hmm.
all merging with synthetic biology.
Precisely. And look, it's powering incredible progress, finding drugs faster, making things more efficiently. That's the upside.
But there's always a but.
But it also naturally creates new ways for cyber threats to sneak in, new vulnerabilities.
And the scale of this automation is pretty big, right? The briefer mentioned Ginkgo Bioworks.
Yeah, that deal with a robotic cloud lab, it just shows you the sheer scale we're talking about.
Wow.
And when you automate that much, you inherently increase the need for remote access. And remote access means...
Remote vulnerabilities. Makes sense.
Think about the COVID vaccines. Automation was absolutely vital to get them developed and produced so quickly.
Right. Incredible speed.
But that speed relied heavily on interconnected digital systems, on data flowing everywhere, which increases the risk profile.
And it's not just the huge companies doing this automation, is it?
Yeah.
The briefer mentioned something about democratization.
Yes, the democratization of synthetic biology. That's the second big driver.
Meaning it's getting easier, cheaper.
Exactly, for way more people. The cost of sequencing DNA, synthesizing it, it's plummeting.
Okay.
Combine that with these remote cloud labs we talked about, well, the barrier to doing some pretty advanced, maybe even risky bioresearch, it's getting lower.
So good for innovation, maybe?
Potentially, yes. But it's a double-edged sword. It also makes creating dangerous pathogens from scratch, de novo synthesis, more feasible.
And the rules haven't caught up.
That's the concern. The tech is moving faster than the regulations. And doing experiments remotely, that can potentially bypass the usual safety checks you'd have in a physical lab.
Okay, another thing that jumped out from the briefer was the sheer number of these high-containment labs being built.
Yes, that global proliferation is quite something. BSL-4 labs, the highest level.
How many are we talking?
The briefer suggests we're nearing 60 of them worldwide. Now, they're essential for studying dangerous pathogens safely.
Mm-hmm.
But many are being built in or near big cities. That's one thing.
Okay.
And maybe more worrying, a significant chunk of the countries hosting these top-tier labs, they don't exactly score top marks on biosecurity best practices.
Right. And if these labs use cloud systems for managing safety,
Then those systems themselves become potential targets for hackers. It adds another layer of vulnerability.
so more labs, maybe variable security, plus more digital connections. Yeah, sounds like a recipe for potential trouble.
It does. And the briefer gives some really stark examples of how cyber biosecurity attacks can actually happen. The threats are getting more diverse.
Like that DNA hacking thing, that sounded wild.
That 2017 example, yeah. Malware actually hidden inside DNA.
How does that even work? Briefly.
Well, basically, the researchers crafted DNA that, when the analysis software read it, caused a buffer overflow. Think of it like trying to pour too much water into a small cup.
Oh.
The extra data spills over and messes up the computer's instructions, letting the attacker's code run instead.
So the DNA itself became the attack vector.
Essentially, yes. Exploiting a vulnerability in the software processing the genetic data. The fact that this is even possible is well, it's a big deal.
Unbelievable. And it's not just lab experiments. We've seen real attacks on infrastructure that affect health,
Yeah.
right? Like messing with water treatment.
Exactly. Florida, California back in 2021 attempts to change chemical levels remotely.
Scary stuff.
And then think about all the network devices in hospitals or labs, robots, climate control systems.
Even the HVAC.
Yeah, there was that case in Texas. Hackers got malware into a hospital's heating and cooling system. Every connected device is a potential door for attackers.
And Lucifer even mentioned theoretical risks like messing with microbial forensics.
It did, potentially hindering our ability to figure out the source of an outbreak, for example.
And this isn't just about human health, is it? Agriculture is a big target too now.
A really critical point. Farming is going digital fast. Remote sensors, automation, you name it.
More efficient, I guess?
Definitely boosts efficiency. But it also opens the door wide to cyber vulnerabilities.
And we're seeing attacks.
Oh yeah, a sharp rise. Things like disrupting livestock feed orders, ransomware hitting farming co-ops. Imagine messing up feeding schedules for thousands of animals.
I remember the JBS attack. The meat processing giant.
Yes, 2021. That caused plant shutdowns, beef prices went up, the government got involved. It showed how much impact a single attack can have.
And experts worry it could get worse. Food contamination, mass shutdowns.
Those are the concerns, yeah. Especially with precision agriculture things relying on GPS, climate controls in, say, chicken houses. They're all potential targets. It really hit home that our food supply is now part of this critical digital infrastructure.
So let's focus on the U.S. specifically. The briefer says life sciences and biotech here are particularly vulnerable.
They are, yes. Think about it. Tons of sensitive R&D data, complex supply chains, often involving partners, distributed manufacturing.
And maybe security hasn't always kept up.
Sometimes, yeah. The stats are pretty sobering. A huge percentage of hacks target healthcare. The average cost of a breach is millions.
Wow.
And that stat about nearly all pharma companies having database exposures, that's alarming.
And these attacks, ransomware, DDoS, they actually impact patient care, research.
Absolutely. They can grind things to a halt. The COVID pandemic, unfortunately, gave us some clear examples.
Like that Miltennium biotech outage.
Right.
During COVID sample sequencing.
Exactly. Critical timing. And the attack on Americold, the cold storage company.
Right when vaccine distribution was kicking off.
Precisely. And then there was the NotPetya attack on Merck. That was huge.
What happened there?
They lost control of tens of thousands of computers. It seriously hampered production of vaccines like hepatitis B and HPV, caused global shortages.
Just shows the ripple effects.
It really does. How a cyber attack on one company can have widespread real-world consequences.
Okay, so beyond those kinds of attacks, the briefer mentions some, well, even more cutting-edge threats. Malicious genomic engineering. That sounds intense.
It does. And it highlights this really subtle but potentially devastating type of vulnerability.
The Israeli research from 2020.
That's the one. They showed malware could actually tamper with synthetic DNA that's been ordered, right? And in a way that could slip past the usual screening checks.
So you could unknowingly create something dangerous, like a toxin.
Exactly. Because the DNA sequence itself was altered maliciously, that's a direct threat to anyone making biologicals.
And potentially to public safety down the line.
Absolutely. And looking further out, though it still feels a bit sci-fi, the idea of attacks directly tweaking electronic gene sequences to make pathogens more dangerous, that's a risk we need to start thinking about.
It's not just about creating dangerous things, though. What about stealing data? Biological data?
A huge issue. Patient medical records are incredibly valuable on the black market, way more than credit card numbers.
Why? What can they be used for?
Medical identity theft, financial fraud, even blackmail. It's nasty stuff.
And for science?
Losing unique data from, say, biobanks or specific outbreak investigations, that could be an irreplaceable loss. Just gone.
And with personalized medicine taking off?
Yeah.
More genomic data floating around.
Precisely. It creates this vast pool of highly personal, sensitive data. The risk of misuse, even potentially for bioweapons, grows. It's kind of ironic, actually.
Or so.
Pathogen genomes are often shared publicly, right? Which is vital for research, for public health responses. But in the wrong hands, that same public data could be misused. It's a difficult balance.
Okay. And the last vulnerability area, medical devices. Hacking insulin pumps, pacemakers. Feels like we've heard about this for a while.
We have, and while the industry is taking steps, cybersecurity for medical devices often lags behind. It's a tough challenge.
But the potential consequences are huge, right?
Yeah.
Life-critical devices.
Potentially fatal attacks are a very real concern. Remember that insulin pump company? They had to do a recall after researchers showed the FDA they could hack it with an app.
Wow. Just shows the ongoing struggle to bake security in from the start.
It really does. It has to be a priority.
Okay, so it's a complex, maybe a bit scary picture the briefer paints. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are recommendations, right? Let's get into those. What can actually be done? Starting with governance, laws.
Yeah, that's foundational. The briefer flags a big gap in U.S. law right now. Genomic data often isn't treated as personally identifiable information.
Which means it doesn't get the same privacy protections.
Not consistently, no. So strengthening the legal side is key. There's a call for a big health privacy law, something like Europe's GDPR.
Okay.
Expanding HIPAA protections, adding things like a right to be forgotten, making sure insurance companies can't discriminate based on your genes. Dr. Rothstein really advocates for these kinds of changes.
That seems essential, giving people more control over their own biological code, basically.
Absolutely. And things like a national standard for data security and notifying people if there's a breach. That just feels like common sense these days.
Totally. What about designating the bioeconomy as critical infrastructure?
That's another crucial recommendation. If you label the bioeconomy and biotech sector, and importantly, that includes digital agriculture as critical infrastructure.
Then it gets more security focused,
Yeah.
more funding.
Exactly. More protection, more resources, and guidance too, especially for sectors like farming on how to secure all this new digital equipment. Canada apparently has a program for this. That could be a model.
And better coordination between government agencies, CISA and HHS.
Yes. Getting the cybersecurity folks, CISA, and the health folks, HHS, working together much more closely on healthcare cyber issues is vital. Seems like there's some agreement on this, but it needs real legislative action to give it teeth and resources.
Makes sense, streamlining things.
Okay.
Okay, what about research, especially the high-risk stuff?
Right. The second area is raising standards there. Because, as we said, the tech is moving so fast.
And the current guidelines don't really cover the cyber side adequately.
That's the point. Existing biorisk management needs to fully integrate cyber risk mitigation. It's not an add-on anymore. It has to be built in.
So things like having plans for incidents, backing up data.
Definitely. Rapid response protocols, reliable data backups that actually get tested. And there's this gap. Private labs that don't get federal money or handle specific dangerous select agents, there's less oversight there.
And gain-of-function research, the kind that can make pathogens more dangerous.
Strengthening oversight there is key. And fully implementing the recommendations from the NSABB, that's the National Science Advisory Board for Biosecurity, about identifying risky research, including assessing the cyber vulnerabilities.
We need clarity, basically, on how we review research that could accidentally or purposefully make pathogens nastier via a cyber attack.
Precisely. Closing that potential loophole and pushing for stronger international agreement on these issues, too. It's a global challenge.
Okay, final recommendations area. Safeguarding that boundary where digital meets physical biology.
Yeah, that digital to physical frontier. One interesting idea is shifting more liability onto software makers if their products aren't secure.
Making them responsible for building security in.
Exactly. And the briefer argues this absolutely must include biotech software and hardware. Set high standards from the start. Security by design.
Because the hardware itself, like brain-computer interfaces, has its own unique vulnerabilities.
It does. Remember that 2013 experiment?
Right.
It showed the potential risks even then, and for gene synthesis specifically.
Making DNA to order.
Right. The recommendation is for HHS to really evaluate the regulations and require strong screening protocols for everyone providing these services.
What kind of protections?
Things like advanced ways to detect intrusions into the DNA synthesizers themselves, maybe shorter time windows for screening orders, but with mandatory double checks, and much better information sharing between the providers.
Practical steps.
Very practical. And expanding initiatives like Secure DNA, maybe creating a sort of trusted foundry model for genome sequencers to ensure security along the whole chain.
Okay, one last thing. Public awareness.
Absolutely critical. You need public trust. You need to fight disinformation.
So, a communication campaign.
Yeah, led by DHS CISA, using lessons learned from COVID, working with behavioral scientists, just getting people to understand the biological risks in our super-connected world better.
So, wrapping this up, this deep dive really shows the cyber-biosecurity connection isn't theoretical anymore. It's a real, growing threat.
Yeah, with impacts across healthcare, farming, research, national security. You name it. Our digital lives and our biological existence are just getting more and more intertwined.
It's undeniable.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, with tech getting so deeply embedded in biology?
What other unexpected risks are lurking out there?
Exactly. What haven't we thought of yet? And maybe more importantly, what can we as individuals actually do? How can we push for better security in all this?
Definitely food for thought. Something to mull over and maybe dig into more if you're interested. There's more information out there.
Absolutely. Because understanding these threats and tackling them proactively, well, it's going to be essential for keeping us all safe in the future.